What if I told you the American dream didn't die of natural causes? It was murdered, executed on a single Sunday evening that history books try to ignore. We call it the Nixon Shock, the moment your money turned into a lie. Inflation isn't an accident, it's a policy, a hidden tax that has been draining your life's work for 50 years. You feel it at the grocery store. You feel it in the rent check. But do you know who is actually pulling the strings? They promised it was temporary. They lied. And that lie created a debt spiral that is about to snap. This is the story of the greatest heist in financial history. While the middle class vanishes, a select few are playing a rigged game. It's time for a financial awakening. Welcome to the truth behind the Nixon Shock.
Your grandfather bought a house on a single salary. You have 2 degrees. You work 60 hours a week, and you can barely afford rent. That isn't bad luck. That isn't just the economy. That is a crime scene. Have you ever looked at a long-term chart of America and noticed that everything seems to break at the exact same time? Housing became unaffordable. Wages flatlined. And the national debt exploded from a flat line into a vertical suicide pact. Most people think this is just a flaw in capitalism. But what if I told you there is a specific date, a single Sunday evening, where the rules of the game were rewritten against you? Before August 15th, 1971, money was a certificate of ownership for a physical asset. After that date, it became a tool of control. This is the story of the Nixon Shock, the exact moment the US dollar turned into a lie, and how that lie is the direct reason why the middle class is dying while the debt spiral accelerates. By the end of this video, you will finally understand why working harder doesn't feel like it pays off anymore. It's not in your head, it's in the currency. Before we pull back the curtain on the specific documents that authorize this theft, I need to be honest with you. The history books conveniently skip this chapter for a reason. Stories like this, that question, the very foundation of the Federal Reserve and the banking system, have a habit of getting limited by the algorithm. They don't want you connecting the dots. So, if this video disappears one day, you will know why. Channels that expose the machinery of the system do not survive on ad revenue alone. They survive because a small group of people decides that the truth matters more than the narrative. If you are part of that group, if you are tired of being gaslit about transitory inflation, hit that like button and subscribe. It is the only signal we have that you are paying attention. And I want to ask you something. Something the financial news anchors would never dare to ask. Look at your life today versus the stories your parents told you. What is one thing they could afford easily on a normal wage? That feels like an impossible luxury to you today. Is it a home, a car, or just a grocery bill that doesn't make you panic? Drop your answer in the comments below. Let's build a record of what they actually took from us. Now, I want to go much deeper into this, because to truly understand the magnitude of the heist, you have to understand that the disaster of 1971 didn't happen in a vacuum. It was the inevitable collapse of a promise that had been broken, in secret, for a decade. We need to travel back to the scene of the crime. The year is 1944. While World War II was still raging, the most powerful men in the world met at a hotel in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. They sat down to design the financial architecture of the entire planet, and the deal they struck was incredibly simple. The United States held most of the world's gold, so the world would use the US dollar. And in exchange, the United States made a solemn promise. Every $35 you held wasn't just paper. It was a claim check for exactly 1 ounce of gold. If you were the French government, or the British, or the Japanese, and you didn't trust the paper anymore, you could walk up to the window at the US Treasury, slap your dollars on the counter, and demand the yellow metal. It was the ultimate leash on power. It meant that Washington could not spend money it didn't have. If they printed too much paper, people would notice the value dropping and come for the gold. The system was honest. It was solid. But then, the 1960s happened. A new breed of politician took over. Lyndon B. Johnson, the Great Society, the war in Vietnam. The government wanted to do everything. They wanted massive welfare programs at home and a massive military machine abroad. Guns and butter. But there was a problem, a mathematical problem. They didn't have the gold to pay for it all. So, what did they do? Did they tell the American people the truth? Did they say, "We can't afford this"? No. They chose the coward's way out. They started to cheat. They began printing dollars that were backed by absolutely nothing. They flooded the world with paper claims on gold that simply did not exist. Economists call this the Triffin dilemma. It sounds technical, but it is actually a paradox of doom. To run the global economy, the US had to export dollars so other countries could trade. But the more dollars they exported, the less likely it was that they could ever honor the gold promise. It was a Ponzi scheme on a geopolitical scale, and the cracks started to show. By the mid-60s, foreign leaders started to smell the smoke. Specifically, the French, President Charles de Gaulle. He looked at the mountain of American paper piling up in his banks, and he looked at the spending coming out of Washington, and he realized it was a scam. He called it America's exorbitant privilege. He realized the US was buying real French companies, real French land, and real French labor, with paper money they printed for free. So, he called the bluff. He didn't just complain, he acted. He ordered the French Navy to transport dollars back to the United States and demand the physical gold in exchange. He wanted the metal. Other nations saw this, and panic set in. Switzerland joined in, Spain joined in, Britain joined in. It was a run on the bank, but the bank was the United States of America. Gold was flowing out of Fort Knox at a terrifying rate. Every hour, millions of dollars in gold bars were being loaded onto planes and ships, leaving the country forever. The US Treasury was bleeding out. They were technically bankrupt. They had issued more claims than they had assets. If they let it continue, America would have zero gold left, zero sovereignty, zero power. The politicians were cornered. They had spent a decade living a lie, pretending they could print wealth without consequence. And in 1971, the bill finally came due. This wasn't just a policy change. This was a default. America was about to stiff the world, and what happened next was the moment they decided that instead of fixing the problem, they would simply change the definition of money itself. Drop a comment below and just write, "I see the fraud." The genius of this crime wasn't the theft itself. It was the sales pitch. They didn't just steal the gold. They convinced the American people that the robbery was an act of patriotism. We need to freeze the frame on the exact moment the trap snapped shut. August 15th, 1971. A Sunday evening. Most American families were sitting in their living rooms, eating dinner, watching Bonanza. Suddenly, the broadcast was interrupted. President Richard Nixon appeared on the screen. He looked serious, he looked authoritative, and he began to sell the most dangerous lie in financial history. He didn't say, "We are bankrupt." He didn't admit that the vault was empty or that the government had spent your future on war and welfare. He didn't say, "We broke the promise." Instead, he painted a picture of America under attack. He blamed international speculators. He blamed greedy foreigners. And then, he dropped the hammer. But he wrapped it in velvet. I want you to listen to his exact words, because one single word in this sentence changed the trajectory of your life forever. He said, "I have directed Secretary Connolly to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold. temporarily. That was the hook. That was the sedative. If he had said permanently, there would have been a revolution that night. People would have rushed the banks. The stock market would have collapsed by Monday morning. But temporarily, that sounds like a pause. That sounds like a technical fix. It told the public, don't panic. We will go back to normal soon. It has been over 50 years. We never went back. That temporary measure was actually a total default on the national debt. It was the United States government telling the world, the contract we signed, it is void. We are keeping the gold. You keep the paper. And to make sure you didn't notice the theft in real time, Nixon did something even more drastic. He issued Executive Order 1115. He froze wages and prices across the entire country. Think about the level of control that requires. It became illegal for your local grocery store to raise the price of milk. It became illegal for your boss to give you a raise. They tried to outlaw inflation by decree. They tried to ban the laws of economics. And for a few months, it looked like it worked. But you cannot legislate reality. When you print infinite money and freeze prices, you get shortages, you get chaos, and eventually, the dam broke. Inflation exploded. But the damage was already done. The link between the dollar and reality had been severed. Before that Sunday night, the dollar was a claim check. It had value because it represented something physical. After that Sunday night, the dollar became fiat. Fiat is Latin. It means, let it be done. It means, because I said so. It is money that has value only because the government has guns and prisons to force you to use it. It is money with no anchor. This was the moment the US dollar stopped being a store of value and started being a tool of political control. Every price spike you see today, every year you feel like you are running faster just to stay in the same place. Every time you look at a house price and laugh because it is so absurd, it all traces back to that one word, temporary. They stole the anchor, and they left us drifting in a sea of infinite paper. Drop a comment below and write, the lie was temporary. So, let's put aside the politics and look at the receipt, because in the world of high finance, there is no such thing as a free lunch. Someone always pays. And in this casino, the house doesn't win, the printer wins. And you, the wage earner, are the one covering the spread. I want you to visualize the American life before the lie took hold. Go back to 1970. Imagine a factory worker. He punches the clock for 8 hours. He drives home to a house he owns. His wife is likely home with the kids. They have one car, one income, and they have savings in the bank. That wasn't ancient history. That was the math of a sound money system. Economists call this the Great Coupling. From 1948 to 1971, productivity and wages grew together. If you produced more, you earned more. It was a fair trade. But look at the chart the moment Nixon signed that order. The line split. Productivity kept shooting up like a rocket. We got computers. We got the internet. We got faster, smarter, more efficient. But wages, they flatlined. For 50 years, you have been working harder, producing more wealth than any generation in history, and taking home less of it. Where did the difference go? It didn't vanish. It was stolen. It was siphoned off by a currency that loses value faster than you can earn it. Let's talk about the debt. In 1971, the US national debt was under $500 billion. It was manageable. Today, it is over $34 trillion. That isn't a number. That is a crime against your grandchildren. And the scariest statistic isn't the debt. It is what that debt has done to the dollar in your pocket. In 1964, one single dollar could buy you 17 oranges at the grocery store. Think about that volume of food. 17 oranges. Today, you can't even buy a decent cup of coffee for $1. You can barely buy the empty cup. The currency has lost over 95% of its purchasing power. We traded sound money for a system of permanent inflation. They call it economic growth. They call it modern monetary theory. But you feel it as getting poorer. You feel it when you need two incomes just to survive where your parents thrived on one. This is the invisible tax. They don't need to raise your income tax to steal your wealth. They just need to print more money, dilute the pool, and watch as the value of your labor evaporates into thin air. It is the greatest trick ever pulled. They convinced you that inflation is natural, like the tide or the weather. It is not. It is a policy choice. And you are the one paying for it. Drop a comment below and write, "Inflation is theft." Now I want to take you behind the curtain, because understanding the theft is one thing, but understanding who kept the money is where the whole picture comes together. You might be asking yourself, if this system destroys the currency, if it creates inflation, if it hurts the average American, why do they keep doing it? The answer is simple. It doesn't hurt everyone. For a select group of people, inflation isn't a crisis. It is a business model. We need to talk about the Cantillon effect. It sounds technical, but it is the most important concept in modern finance. And it explains why Wall Street loves 1971. Imagine a pyramid. At the very top, you have the government and the Federal Reserve. They have the power to create money out of thin air. Right below them, you have the big banks, the hedge funds, and the massive government contractors. When the Fed turns on the printer, who gets the money first? Do they mail a check to you? No. They loan it to the banks at near zero interest rates. They hand it to contractors in massive deals. These people get the money before it circulates. They get the money before prices go up. And what do they do with it? They buy assets. They buy houses. They buy stocks. They buy land. They use the cheap cash to buy up the real world. And because they are buying, the prices of those assets skyrocket. They get rich because of the inflation. Now look at the bottom of the pyramid. That is you, the wage earner, the retiree on a fixed income. By the time that new money trickles down to your paycheck, it has already done its damage. Prices have already doubled. You are paying for their party. You are the liquidity that allows them to exit their positions with a profit. This is a wealth transfer mechanism from the poor and the middle class, straight to the financial elite. It acts like a vacuum cleaner, sucking value from your savings and depositing it into their asset portfolios. And the people running this machine? They are part of what we call the revolving door. Have you ever noticed how the Secretary of the Treasury is almost always a former executive from a major Wall Street bank? Have you noticed how the heads of the Federal Reserve leave public office and immediately take multi-million-dollar speaking gigs at the very banks they were supposed to regulate? They aren't protecting you. They are protecting the system that enriches them. They privatize the gains. And when the system crashes, like in 2008, they socialize the losses. They get the bailouts. You get the bill. 1971 gave them the key to the printer, and they have been using it to buy your neighborhood ever since. Drop a comment below and write, "The game is rigged." Now, I know exactly what you are thinking. You are thinking that this machine is too big to break. You are thinking that if the Federal Reserve, the government, and Wall Street are all dancing to the same tune, then you are powerless. But that is exactly what they want you to believe. Apathy is their best friend. If you believe you are a victim, you will act like one. You will keep your head down, keep saving in a melting currency, and hope for the best. But here is the truth. You do not need to destroy the Federal Reserve to save yourself. You do not need to wait for a political revolution. You just need to stop playing their game by their rules. The Nixon Shock taught us one undeniable lesson. If you do not hold it, you do not own it. And if it can be printed, it is not money. So, how do you opt out of a rigged system? First, you must fundamentally change your definition of saving. For the last 50 years, we have been trained like Pavlov's dogs to believe that saving means hoarding US dollars in a bank account. But we now know that dollars are not a store of value. They are a medium of exchange. They are meant to move, not to sit. If you leave your life's energy sitting in fiat currency, you are letting them steal from you every single night while you sleep. You are holding an ice cube in the desert. You need to convert your paper into hard assets, assets that have no counterparty risk. I am talking about gold. I am talking about silver. I am talking about land. And yes, for those who understand the digital age, I am talking about Bitcoin. Why these specific things? Because they are finite. No politician can sign a bill and double the supply of gold tomorrow. No central banker can print more land. When you own hard assets, you are stepping off the treadmill. You are opting out of the inflation tax. Second, you need to understand the weapon of the wealthy. Good debt. The system is designed to keep you in bad debt, credit cards, car loans, a consumer spending. That is modern-day serfdom. You are working to pay interest to the masters of the universe. Kill that debt. Starve them of that revenue. But understand that in an inflationary environment, debt has a secret function. If you borrow money at a fixed rate to buy a cash-flowing asset, like a rental property, you are doing something brilliant. You are shorting the dollar. Think about it. You borrow money that is valuable today, and you pay it back 10 or 20 years later with money that has been inflated away. You pay them back with worthless paper, while you keep the hard asset. That is how the rich play the game. They use the system's own inflation against itself. And finally, you need to realize that your financial illiteracy is their greatest asset. They rely on you not understanding what quantitative easing means. They rely on you accepting that 2% inflation is good for you. It is not. It is a slow death. When you start thinking in terms of purchasing power instead of dollars, their spells stop working. You stop listening to the news anchors telling you that inflation is transitory. You look at the money supply chart, and you know the truth. You cannot control what the Federal Reserve does. You cannot control who is in the White House, but you can control where you store the fruit of your labor. You can choose to be the person who trusts the paper and loses. Or you can choose to be the person who takes their sovereignty back. The doors to the cage are open. You just have to walk out. Drop a comment below and write, "I am taking control." If you have watched this far, you are not here by accident. Most people clicked off minutes ago. They went back to the comfortable distractions, back to the scrolling, back to the illusion that the government has everything under control. But you stayed. You listened. And that tells me something important about you. You are part of the minority that actually wants to know how the sausage is made, even if it makes you lose your appetite. Nixon said the suspension of gold was temporary. It has been over 50 years. We are now reaching the end of the long-term debt cycle that began on that Sunday night in 1971. The volatility you see in the markets today, the chaos in the economy, that is the system shaking under the weight of 5 decades of easy money. But now that you see it, you can't unsee it. You are awake in a financial system designed to keep you asleep. So here is what I need you to do. If this video opened your eyes, if it gave you the vocabulary to explain why you feel poorer despite working harder, hit that subscribe button, not for the algorithm, but because we are building a community of people who refuse to be victims of financial repression. This channel exists to arm you with the truth they leave out of the textbooks. Drop a like to help this signal cut through the noise. And most importantly, I want to know who made it to the finish line. Comment below with the phrase, "I see the system." I want to know who the real ones are. And if you want to understand exactly how the Federal Reserve prints this money, and who is actually pulling the levers behind the curtain right now, you need to watch this video right here. It connects the final dots of the puzzle. Click it, and I'll see you there.